Oh my god. Like, first off, bars. Second of all, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm gonna be doing my favorite video of every year, which is my favorite books of 2025. This year, I read 93 books, including 20 rereads. So that's gonna be about 73 new books this year. Amazing for me, amazing reading year, as always. Just to preface this, my stats for the type of books that are on this list are 2 adult historical, 2 adult literary fiction, 1 adult sci-fi, 2 young adult romantasy, 1 young adult romance. All of the books on this list are new authors for me this year, which has never happened to me before. Honestly, kind of disappointing that none of my favorite authors' releases got on this list, but nonetheless, I feel very excited that I now have so many new authors to read from. First honorable mention that I have is Burn the Sea by Mona Tawari, and this is special to me because this is the first book I've ever been sent by the publisher. This book is published by an imprint managed by one of my favorite booktubers, Janani from The Story Ain't Over. I was super excited to get this book and I read it like pretty soon after I got it. So Burn the Sea is an Indian historical fantasy, which is crazy, and I love that for us. This takes place the time where somewhere in South India was getting colonized by Portuguese, and in this historical fantasy setting, the Portuguese are actually characterized by these like sea monsters, and the story is about a babka who is currently a princess, and it's about her going through challenges and having to step up to fight for her kingdom. This is just so epic on both a personal and large scale. Like, we're dealing with kingdoms and magic and stuff, but a babka is like getting intertwined in all this like political stuff, which is really like thought-provoking, and battle strategy is just so stressful to me. I really like the main character in this book and how strong she was and how easy she was to follow, and this world again was just so interesting. We need more Indian historical fantasy. I highly recommend for fantasy people. The thing is, this book is actually not out yet. It comes out in 2026. I need people to read this. I need to obsess over this, and the worst part about this book is that I have to wait so long for the sequel to be out. Next honorable mention, I actually do own The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. I read this book in May and I read a library copy, and then I quickly realized that I needed to own it. In The Namesake, we follow this Bengali couple as they move from India to the US in like the 80s, 90s. They have children and they raise their children in America, and it's about the diaspora that child feels about being Indian in an American society. This book is definitely a favorite of mine. However, I don't think it's perfect, so that's why it's not a favorite, just on honorable mentions. But the fact that I own it says something. I just really loved following these parents and the son. It was just really therapeutic for me to live out somebody else's Indian experience. I wouldn't think that I would relate to these people who were from like 20 years ago, but the Indian immigrant experience is the same. I'm just so glad that this book exists for people to dive into and to relate to. The quote I have for The Namesake is, "She is the gift of accepting her life. As he comes to know her, he realizes that she has never wished she were anyone other than herself, raised in any other place, in any other way." Very much a favorite for me. I can't wait to annotate this. Now we're moving on up to the actual list. So first off, on number 7, I think, we have Falling Like Leaves by Misty Wilson. I gotta recommend this because of the Goodreads short stories. So sometimes they do have bangers on there. This is my resident happy book of the year. I feel like every year I'll go through my list and I'm like, oh, okay, another sad adult literary fiction, which I love. I also love happy books, but I feel like it's hard to like rank them along with like actually important books. But I love this book. This book is so fun. This is like fall personified in a book, and I thought it would be cheesy because I thought it would be like, oh my god, like pumpkin spice in the air, we're like walking on leaves. But something about the writing, something about the small town setting really pulled me in. Falling Like Leaves is basically like one of those romances where it's like a city girl goes to small town and meets a small town boy and changes her whole life. Basically, Ellis is from New York City. She gets thrown into like starting her senior year at this small town called Bramble Falls, and she's been there before, but you know, she loves New York City. She doesn't want to go back. While she's starting school there, she's getting acclimated, she runs into her childhood crush. This town like embodies fall. Like they'll have like every single fall event ever, like apple picking, pumpkin carving, pumpkin prom, bonfires. Every single chapter I'm like, okay, like what event are we going to now? Like it was so cute. I read this in the holiday season, but technically before winter started, so it's still kind of good for me. It's still fall. I really liked the main character and the small town and the love interest. Like everything about this book was just so fun for me. I really think setting is a make or break thing for a lot of rom-coms, and I would also recommend this book if you liked Fake Skating by Lynn Painter, because it has a whole dynamic of girl goes back to small town for childhood boy, but then there's something weird about the relationship that's not what it used to be. I think the author is putting out more books in this series, so I can't wait for that. And the song I associate with this book is Love Bomb by The Neighborhood. Next book on this list is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I watched a video where Cindy talks about this for like years ago, and that's imprinted on my mind. I didn't think this would make this list after I read it, but the staying power of this book is impeccable. The Nightingale is a World War II book. We follow two sisters who live in France, and the older sister is a mother and a housewife, and she's currently somewhere in France where it's like getting occupied. And then the younger sister is like 16, and she's getting sent to live with her older sister, but she's really rebellious, so she immediately just like tries to join the rebel group to fight off the Nazis, and she inspires her older sister to rebel in her own ways. Something about this book is just so deep and charming, and it's also a dual timeline, because you find out in the first chapter there's this like woman in the future that's related to all of this, but you don't know how she's related, and that mystery propelled me to keep going. And something about the wartime setting and the writing and these characters really enamored me. I just thought the resistance was so inspiring, specifically like the younger sister, with how she would like, you know, physically like try to help people escape or stuff like that. Like that was stressful. Like I could barely read her chapters because I was like so stressed out. But the older sister is coming to terms with the fact that like her town is being occupied, and she's slowly helping the resistance in her own way. And I found that really interesting and inspiring. The song I have for this book is Cardigan by Taylor Swift, because it's like very nostalgic and like almost innocent. The quote I have for this book is, "In love we find out who we want to be. In war we find out who we are." The next book on this list is Dust Settles North, which is the other book the Boundless Press, the publishing company managed by Jenny from The Story and Over, released. It actually released this year in April, but I got the arc of it. In the Dust Settles North, we follow Hannah and Zane in 2012, and their mother has just died. They're going to Egypt to do like funeral rites and stuff, and Hannah ends up staying in Egypt while Zane ends up going back to New York. I was just surprised at how much I could feel the loss of the mother. You know, having grief is like a really common premise for a lot of books, and I feel like sometimes with these books it's like, oh, like they try to really justify how much the character is grieving by going on and on about like the relationship and stuff, and there was flashbacks to this book and like stuff like that, but I again was just so surprised how much I felt the loss of this figure in their lives. And Hannah's story in Cairo was really interesting, because I never really hear about people growing up in Western countries that go back to where their parents came from, so I thought that kind of diaspora was interesting. And then Zane is also dealing with a lot in New York, because he's dealing with a lot of generational trauma and dealing with stuff that his dad left behind, and how to kind of heal that family trauma himself. A really amazing story about immigrant children and generational trauma and the immigrant experience, and I really appreciated how nuanced and messy the characters were without like glorifying it. The next kind of chapter we have here is my romantasy era. So first up we have The River She Became. I read this book because I really enjoyed For She Is Wrath this year, and then I saw that she had this on NetGalley, so I immediately was like yes, and I'm so glad. Emily Rucka is definitely my favorite new author of the year. In The River She Became, I describe it as a mix between An Ember in the Ashes and The River She Knows. Somebody's really trying to take over her village, So she's like a scholar, she's like kind of working for them, but on her side she's like stealing stuff to like kind of rebel for her village. And she ends up having to like cross over to like the Fey realm to gain an artifact there and help her village. In that Fey world, we have Kian, and he is currently like the captain of the whoever's control there, but he's actually the like old prince that the kingdom is like captured of. Also a double agent, also trying to like feel out the rebellion so he can take his land back. And Seema and Kian cross paths. They both end up having to like help this like Fey king person. They are also like trying to rebel within themselves. I found it refreshing that they were both oppressed in the sense that they were both trying to rebel. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of times in these romantic stuff, like there's some weird power imbalance between the girl and the guy. It really just brought me back to YA fantasy. Like I said, Ember in the Ashes, and we have like a classic romantic protagonist in Seema, but I liked her, and I like Kian too. A lot of these books, like they don't really rebel on their own unless they like come together as a team, but you'll see instances in like the beginning of the book how they're both like trying to do stuff on their own, and they'll like figure each other out and help each other. But I found that kind of determination on their own really refreshing. The main character, Seema, has even though she's a human, she has magic. She's not like considered like weak or anything. I feel like in these romantic stuff there's always like some kind of weird power imbalance. I like this book because it's like a really good execution of all these like romantic tropes, and like I said, there's no power imbalance between the romance. They're both like 16 or whatever. There's specifically a line where he says he's not thousands of years old, which a low standard, but I love. Kind of discussion of colonialism and how they're both fighting against these oppressors is really satisfying to me, because like this is what I want to read about. I want to read about fighting against the oppressor. The next white romantic that I have on the list is The Rose Bargain, which, you know, if you're interested in what I have to say about this series, last video I posted is literally a review on this. The Rose Bargain is Bridgerton times The Cruel Prince times Selection times Red Queen, and it is YA perfection. The betrayals, the tension, the romance, the angst, like it has all of it, and I was up at night eating it all up. The Rose Bargain takes place in the Regency era, but instead of human royalty, there's a Fey queen that's taken over, and pretty much everything is like the same except for the fact that the queen has powers. So once in your lifetime you're allowed to bargain with the queen, you're allowed to ask for something, and you have to give up something in exchange. It's really fun to figure out like what all the characters asked for. Our main girl, Ivy, is going to debut in society, and there's a twist that this year the queen's Fey son is going to have a competition to find his wife. Ivy signed up for this competition because she wants to redeem her family name, but she also ends up getting in a cahoots with the Fey prince's human brother, who is planning to overthrow the crown. This book has like every single trope ever, so I had a lot of fun with this. The Rose Bargain is very much inspired by Ivy, the Taylor Swift song. So if you like that kind of longing, yearning vibe, definitely recommend. And it's my song for the book, and it's on my playlist for the book. Every single year, I usually have like one book that's like my favorite book, and to be honest, this year I didn't have that, and that's fine. The Dream Hotel, it's one of those premises where you can arrest people based off if you think they're gonna commit a crime in the future. So there's that whole exploration of autonomy, the whole justification. Can you punish people for something they haven't even done yet? And I actually got recommended this book by Cindy on YouTube. We follow our main girl, who is a mom, and she's getting detained at the airport because they think she's going to kill her husband, and she has no intentions of doing so, but either way she gets stuck in this detainment center that they're not allowed to call prison. Actually, the way they conduct this information about like who's going to commit a crime is they monitor your dreams. Our main character kind of like casually gave away her right for other people to access her dreams because she was like trying to use this device for other means. And I just thought that entire concept of like signing away like you and your personhood and your dreams and your ideas to AI so relevant and so scary, because I definitely don't think about that when I'm going through like the terms and acknowledgements. An analysis of the prison incarceration system and I was just so fascinated and disgusted by it at the same time because it made absolutely no sense. And it's just such an interesting book to read, and it's really thought-provoking. All his life, he had tried to instill in her immigrants' habits of caution, reminding her to follow the rules, avoid unnecessary attention, and give careful consideration to decisions she made. But once more, she had misstepped and was deserving of blame. Probably my #1 favorite fiction book of the year is Blue Sisters by Coco Malores. And this is also a book that kind of crept up on me. But Blue Sisters, we follow 3 sisters, and we follow them 1 year after their 4th sister has died. And they're all in different phases of their life, and it's about them kind of coming together and grieving together. And I found the relationship and the story so beautiful, especially because like they all have a relationship with addiction. Typically, I don't like reading about addiction because it's really hard and involves the characters making bad decisions over and over again. It didn't glorify anything, it just really felt like an insight into these sisters' lives, which I really appreciated. And the 4 sisters really reminded me of Little Women. And in Little Women, they're younger, they're more idealistic version of like what sisters look like. But Blue Sisters is very like vulnerable and raw and real, and these sisters fight. They say mean things, and it's very like devastating but comforting at the same time. So if you liked Little Woman, I would definitely recommend this for a more realistic sister relationship. And the song I have for this book is True Blue by Boy Genius. You make yourself the martyr so that I become the monster. You need me to be bad so you can be good. So that's it for my fiction section. I'm gonna do my nonfiction now. My favorite memoir of the year is The House of My Mother, and this is about a child that has been a victim of the parent vlogging landscape. So her mom has been filming their family and uploading it to the internet for basically her entire life. And in this case, it turns out that the mom was abusive this whole time and narcissistic and kind of had 2 personalities. One kind of like perfect mom personality for the cameras, but when the cameras are off, she was an abusive mom. I never really been into family vlogging at all. The only times I've heard about family vlogging is just because of how problematic it is, and I've like kind of heard the story about the Frank family. Ever since her book came out, I wanted to read her story, and it is just so fascinating. So the story itself is kind of like about the experience of having your entire life and your family's entire life online without your consent. I don't know what Sherry Frank wants to do with her life, but she needs to put out more books. Like, her writing is impeccable, and a lot of these times with these celebrity memoirs, you know, I don't expect their writing to be great, but hers really was. I'm just so in awe of how she's able to encapsulate all of her feelings and express them in this kind of way. I really love the fact that this is a book, because a lot of time when they have documentaries of this family, they'll end up having to like blur out footage because of the younger children and stuff like that. But here, because it's her book, she doesn't mention her younger siblings by name, and I find it so powerful that she's really claiming a narrative that she never wanted to be out there in the first place. In my wrap up, I think it's like my July wrap up, I go into like how this book made me think about like influencer culture and how people online are glorified, but I don't think that their behavior is normal, and I don't think we should be glorifying this kind of addictive view-seeking behavior, which is ironic for me because I'm posting on the internet. Ruby wept through it all, a woman perpetually at odds with her own equilibrium. Perhaps that's why she wanted so many children, a set of Russian nesting dolls, each one a slightly smaller version of the last, to absorb the tsunami of emotions. For what better way to fill the gaping void within than to surround yourself with adoring little mini-me's? Interesting, though, how someone who cried so much herself seemed entirely immune to the tears of others, including mine. Like, oh my god. Like, first off, bars. Second of all, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I actually do own my favorite non-fiction book of the year, The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I actually really don't like John Green's fiction books, but I want to try his non-fiction because I love him in Crash Course. I love his TikToks. I love him as a person. Anthologies don't usually work for me, but this one really did, and I feel like this is a really good introduction to non-fiction. So, The Anthropocene Reviewed. Each chapter, John Green talks about a different object or kind of concept relating to humanity and rates it on a 5-star scale. So we have really fun ones like the Hall of Presidents, teddy bears, the Notes app, Monopoly. Like, seemingly random stuff. I love knowing like the history of like random objects and stuff, and like how did we get here type thing. Like I love learning, and this one is really a good introduction for that. Like I learned so much about like all of these different topics, and it's just like a little bit of exposure to them, you know. I really think this is a good gateway book into like figuring out like, oh, like what you are interested in learning more about and kind of going from there. This book is like about humanity and humanity's relationship with things, and I just found it so thought-provoking. I don't believe in humanity at all, and humanity sucks, but this book really makes me believe in humanity, and I'm like, John Green, save us, save us. My favorite passage in general from this book is air conditioning. Air conditioning, like so much in the Anthropocene, was kind of background that reshaped my life without my ever thinking about it. By writing to you from the early hours of 2021, entering a movie theater at all feels wildly unnatural. What's natural for humans is always changing. And I love that whole, like, what's natural for humans is always changing. There's so much about it, but he talks about, like, how certain places in the country, like, need more air conditioning than others. And it's, like, how movie theaters use air conditioning. But in general, it's, like, this thing about, like, air conditioning, and you just associate that with, like, oh, yeah, I need air conditioning. And ever since this passage, I'm, like, I decreased my air conditioning consumption. I was like, wait, I don't even think about that. But I do use it, and it really made me think of like everyday things in my life. I'm like, how, like, why do we use this? I think also another passage, I don't remember specifically which one, about lawns, and it talks about like American lawn culture and how that's just like normalized. But here this book talks about like a lot of things that are just like normalized in American culture specifically, that are just like, how did we get here? And like, you know, we can change this. I feel like humanity's so stuck on like a lot of things, and we decide that sometimes, you know, like stuff like lawn care or air conditioning, like sometimes they're needs, sometimes they're just society. So that's gonna be it for my list of my favorite books this year. Please let me know what your favorites are. Please let me know what you thought about any books in this list. Even if you hated them, I really want to know. I'm just so glad to be here. Thank you guys so much for watching me and for supporting me. Be sure to check out my worst books of the year, which is coming out after this. But then also my November-December wrap up, and then I'm also going to be ranking like 2025 YA releases, so stay tuned for that.